Today I'm going to show you how I make potting mix for my garden.
Into my seedling tray, I'm going to add 3 ingredients right now. Peat moss and coconut coir are both going to be very good at absorbing water and retaining moisture. We don't measure over in this household, so I just eyeball it. Compost is going to add some nutrition to those seedlings. You can use any compost you'd like, but I tend to stick with mushroom compost. It's got some longer pieces. Most people would probably sift that out. I'm just going to leave it in there. I want that soil to have more aeration. I want it to be a little bit more fluff and loose and crumbly. That way the seedlings can pop through. So for that, I could use 2 things. The first is perlite. This is going to absorb some of that water, so it's going to retain moisture, but it's also going to aerate the soil. This I really like using for seed starting, but sometimes I also use vermiculite. This is vermiculite, so its texture is very similar to perlite. I'm not gonna add this vermiculite in there. I'm actually gonna use this to top all of my seedlings, and I'll show you that later. Usually I either mix it with my hands or with the trowel, but I'm used to making tortillas, so sometimes this is a little bit easier for me. Now I wanna get this nice and moist. That way, whenever I pop my seeds in there, they're immediately gonna come in contact with moisture, and that will help them start to germinate, versus if you fill up your container and this soil is dry, you add water on top, that peat moss is hydrophobic, which means that it doesn't want the water. It doesn't want to be friends. It likes being on its own. You kind of have to force them to get along.
Get your butt back over there right now.
But if you introduce the water now and you force them to get along and then you add the seed, then you're going to have a better chance of germination. And to get the soil wet, I'm going to be using rainwater, because it's $3.99 right now, baby. I want my soil to form a ball, sort of like this, and then be able to crumble easily. I don't want it dripping wet. The bottom portions right here are a little too wet. My bad. So I'm gonna add a little bit more peat moss. So if I squeeze, I can form a ball, but it can also fall apart loosely. So I'm just gonna fill my tray with a little bit of soil, and then I'm just gonna put my label right here. I think I'm gonna start 2 of each plant. In an ideal world, I would be able to find all of my tools and not misplace them, but unfortunately I can't find my dibber, so I'm just gonna use a pencil. In every single cell, I'm gonna make a small indentation. You don't want it to become too deep, because if you make it too deep and you drop the seed in, the seed might start to germinate, but then it has to make its way all the way up through that soil to finally find the light, and you might lose that seed in the process. I'm gonna place about 2 seeds in each cell. Could I do more than 2 seeds? Absolutely. But I think 2 is a good amount. That way, in case one doesn't germinate, I have a shot of the other one taking. When the seeds are this small, sometimes I don't even fully cover them with soil. I'll just sprinkle a little bit loosely. I don't pack it down, and instead what I do is I take a little bit of vermiculite and I sprinkle it over the top. The reason I do that is because when this vermiculite absorbs water, it's gonna retain some of that moisture to help the seeds germinate, but it's still light enough that it's not compacting on top of the seed. It's not preventing it from popping up. And then I'm gonna repeat the same process for every other cell. Because I've pre-moistened the soil, I'm just gonna lightly water the top. During the day, it's nice and warm here in Arizona, but at night, it can get pretty cold still, so I'm gonna cover it with a humidity dome to help trap in some of that heat, and also to stop any birds or anything else from eating my little seeds before they sprout. This is the humidity dome that I'm using right now. It's from the Greenhouse Megastore. I'm gonna be honest with you, it's not the best quality, or at least not anymore, because it just gets so hot here that it made all of the plastic sort of warp a little bit. And I was hoping that it would sort of snap into place, that way it doesn't go anywhere. But when it gets too windy, it can fly off. So what I do is I set it on top, and you can see that there's some gaps here. Then I take these little clips, office clips, bought them at the Dollar Tree. They come in a pack of like 10 or 12 for $1. And I just clip the 4 sides. When I cover them up every single day in the morning, I will come out here and I'll uncover it. And then right before the sun goes down, I'll cover them up again. And then once my seedlings start to take off, I won't use the humidity dome anymore. And they should be good until they're ready to transplant.
38 days later.
It's been a few weeks since then, and these are those same seedlings. So as you can see, the tomatoes are looking fantastic. The peppers are still popping up. And I took the trays from the bottom off just because it looks like it's gonna rain today. Look at that sky. These have already been hardened off. At one point, it was getting really cold outside, so I brought them into my grow tent, but they've been hardened off since then, so they're ready to go into the garden beds whenever I have time to plant them. And that's probably gonna happen in the next few days. Also, you might see a few of them looking sad like these. That's because at one point it got so windy that some of my trays fell over. But it's okay. We still have time to plant here in the low desert, right?
12 hours later.
My trees! Oh my god!
The next day.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? They're still alive. Most of them. I mean, some of them do look pretty. Oh. They were literally torn up. You can still see some of the ice right here. Damn it.
40 days later.
Don't worry, it's been a few weeks since then. These are some of the dwarf varieties. Look how beautiful they look. And here's some of the survivors. Everything eventually worked out for the best. As for the peppers, none of them made it after that storm, but I started over again, and a few weeks later, these were transplanted out. So I have several more peppers and eggplant. And look how pretty they look. So everything always works out one way or another. Sometimes you just got to start over a bunch of times.